I'm your host, Nancy Bacci. With me today is Megan Huckenpahler from the City of Somerville. She is one of the budget analysts in the department, and we're excited to have you on today, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
And our fun topic today is going to be participatory budgeting. So for the first time in Somerville's history, this is going to be a new process happening. So before we dive into the details, can you tell us a little bit of the why? Why now?
Yeah. I think a big reason is our new Mayor Ballantyne. As then councilor in 2019, she proposed that the city examine implementing participatory budgeting, which is a mouthful, by the way. So if you or I want to say PB for short, we'll know it's not peanut butter, but it's a tongue twister. So she proposed that in 2019, and then as mayor wanted to make sure we do it as a city. And so we talked about doing it in July of 2022, and now we are partway through implementing it and getting it out to the public.
It's very exciting. As we know, other communities and areas have done this as well, so it's interesting to see as we're kind of looking at some of our counterparts as well, and you know, Somerville really enjoys being viewed as a progressive city, so this seems like a nice component to add to kind of the overall view and vision for the city as well.
Yeah, it is. A lot of folks know participatory budgeting from our neighbors in Cambridge who do it, and they have just wrapped up their 9th cycle.
Wow.
So that means they've been doing it for 9 years. They've, refined the process, and we learned some tips and tricks from them.
Wonderful.
But it actually originated globally in the 1980s down in Brazil. And it's spread across the globe. It's done in cities, capital cities, states, not at the federal level, but all across the globe, and you can see where that's been done. And sometimes it is with city budgets, with school budgets, with capital funding. And the cities that closest mirror ourselves are Cambridge, Hartford, Connecticut, Greensboro, North Carolina, and Vallejo, California.
Interesting. One, I had no idea that it was so far-reaching, which seems really exciting when you think of the need for engagement opportunities with the communities, and we look at that on the city staff, like the budget reflects our values, right? So it's really important that we see this as a two-way process, right? And I think Somerville has such an engaged population. I think that people are very engaged civically, but also, our social and art scenes, and I think this is just a nice thing to add as a way to really become involved and help to kind of set the direction of the community people live in and are so invested in.
Yeah, that's the goal. We've set aside $1 million, and of course it's going to go to a lot of really great projects and hopefully grow to even more funding in future years. But the biggest goal of participatory budgeting is exactly what you're saying, which is getting people involved in how their government is run, getting them involved, throughout the process, learning about boards and commissions, learning about how we prioritize bike lanes to update, or how a city budget works overall, where their funding, where their tax dollars are going, and using this as that first stepping stone to introduce people to their city government for those who have not been involved in the past.
I think to your point about that is, as we start heading into budget cycle ourselves, looking ahead to that, and it's always so fascinating to me, like the public comment part of the budget process where, members of the community have listened to departments present and, maybe have taken some notes or had a question about why one direction was chosen over another, and then for them to kind of have that platform. But again, that allows kind of like after the work is done to say, here are my thoughts on it. This is really exciting to be like, wait, there's dollars behind this, and what are your thoughts? And then looking at sustainability and all of these expansion opportunities is just really exciting. So as we start looking at it for our community, what's the time frame look like for this?
Yeah. So right now, we just kicked off yesterday the idea submission phase, and it's actually the second phase of the process. So back in November, we kicked off a working group, which was 11 residents and Councilor Kelly, Councilor at Large, who helped us design the process and how it would work for Somerville. So at every stage, we're going to see community involvement, but even before we launched it publicly, they helped design what it would look like and what kind of outreach methods and ensuring that it's going to be inclusive and equitable.
Oh, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's work that's already happened. And they had some really awesome feedback and ideas on how to run it. So now we've launched the idea submission phase. So now through May 20th. So we've got March 20th to May 20th.
Okay,
I tried to keep
chunk of time. Yeah.
Yes, 2 whole months. Folks can go online and submit their ideas. at Somervillema.gov /PB for participatory budgeting, but
Gotcha.
not peanut butter. They can also pick up a paper form at the libraries or call 311 and they can help folks submit as well.
Wonderful. I'm pleased to see the options of the library as well. I think when we often talk about engagement in places where community naturally gathers, we're so fortunate to have the 3 amazing branches here, particularly the newly renovated West Branch, which I think is just a jewel in that neighborhood. But the people go to the library for so many different things, right? Well beyond checking out reading materials, musical equipment and bird watching kits and, all of these Chromebooks and all of these really amazing things in addition to the programming. So it seems like a nice also way to reinforce like the idea of going to where people are in order to best engage.
Yeah. And that's another great part that you brought that up, because going to where people are at in the community is how we're doing a lot of our outreach during this time. So members of the public won't see like a participatory budgeting event being held by the city because we want to reach out to community groups, houses of worship, places where people are already at receiving services and gathering as community, and come into those groups to meet with them and talk to them a little bit about participatory budgeting.
That seems like a nice option too. I think sometimes, we know as individuals and whatever a person's role is in their community, everybody is kind of so overbooked and overscheduled sometimes too that I think that people want to be engaged and participate. So knowing that it's not kind of like a yes and, having to fit as something else or attend a meeting or work your schedule around this kind of one standalone option, seems like the willingness to go out and engage in that way will certainly increase participation.
Yeah. We've already talked with the Food Access Coalition group last Thursday. Upcoming, we're going to be talking to the Racial and Social Justice ambassadors. But people will also see flyers in local businesses around once we get those printed. We're in the final stages of designing our posters that will go on the trash cans around the city. And then sending out a mailer to every residential address. So hopefully folks will still hear about it in multiple channels. But so many other departments in human services are already doing that work. So it's trying to piggyback on that as opposed to start something from scratch.
And I will say I was pleased to hear you mention the barrels. Health and Human Services has used that for our Nip It campaign about proper disposal of nip alcohol bottles. And the number of people that we hear feedback from who literally are like, I was out and I went to throw something in the trash and saw this, eye-catching flyer and then followed up and connected with like our Office of Prevention Services. So it's interesting sometimes when you think of things that almost exist in the background of a community, but really kind of catch people's attention in a different way. So
yeah,
I'm interested to hear, you mentioned the RSJ ambassadors as well. So the place for youth voice in this, I think, is really important as well as we start talking about future leaders in our community. And I think young people are fortunate in Somerville and the fact that there is a community that really wants to listen to you. It's not lip service. It really is dedicated engagement oftentimes. So the laundry list you've created seems like really great to kind of get the widest span of participants.
That's true. And when we talk about the youth involvement, we've gone with the same criteria that Cambridge uses for their process, which is allowing anyone 12 and older to submit and vote on ideas. So we really want to make sure that students as well get an opportunity and to shape the future of their city.
Yeah, that seems great. I'm also kind of things generating in my head as well, which I'm sure you've thought of, but our new teen spaces, the Parks and Recreation have, which are just recording record numbers of young people coming in and wanting to be engaged. So really great way to solicit feedback like that. So you talked to us March 20th to May 20th, idea submission time.
Correct.
Okay. May 21st, what happens?
What happens is we're going to take all of those ideas and we're going to start to compile them. And at that point, we'll have our next phase kickoff, which is the proposal review.
Okay.
Also has community involvement. We're going to be asking volunteers called budget delegates to review in subcommittees based on the general gist of the projects that are submitted. So we've got 5 general categories of ideas that we think they'll fall into, but there's always surprises and an option for other.
Yeah.
Yes, there's always an other. But the buckets are streets and sidewalks, parks and green spaces, education, arts and culture, And then the last one, community-wide resources. It's a little bit harder to pinpoint, but when we were talking about ads on trash cans throughout the community, park benches, water fountains, those are things that might be bought in multiples and placed throughout the community is what we envision that category to be.
Great.
So we'll have subcommittees for each of those groups of ideas submitted. They will review the ideas, make sure that they follow the criteria for projects, which are, it costs less than the $1 million to implement, for one.
Good first one to lead with, yes.
And then it has to be a project that we can implement on city-owned property. So I think some confusion might fall there in which parks are city-owned versus state-operated.
Right.
We've also got the newly expanded Green Line and MBTA, which we need to be careful with, is not owned by the city, but the transit authority. And then they have to be ones that don't promote a specific service. So I can't submit an idea that I contract with Nancy Bacci's, company to buy Nancy Bacci's product. But other than that, they're going to review those ideas, conduct additional research, maybe visit the site or area of the city where it's located. We're going to bring in members of city staff that are in those relevant departments, such as mobility, public works, I imagine public space and urban forestry will be a big one, and others. And then they will rate the ideas out of a score of 15.
Oh, okay.
So there's going to be 5 points for feasibility, if it follows the criteria. 5 points for need in the community. Is it something that we already have today and we want more of, such as for trees and bike lanes? Or is it something new entirely that we need and haven't, tapped into yet? And then the impact it will have on the community that we are going to be serving.
Excellent. This is just generating so many thoughts for myself. I find this really, really interesting. And again, just really appreciate the fact we often hear from residents in all of our jobs, right? Just things they wish they could see, or has the city ever considered? And, you feel like sometimes your answer is, well, like here's the scope of work we do. We're always interested in ideas. But this is, again, having the dollars attached to it is just a game changer. So it's not an exercise for community members to say, here are some things I'd like to see. Like there's real potential for implementation of ideas, which I think just feels such a great return on the investment for this.
Yeah, to be able to see something come up in the community is going to be amazing. And for folks who are willing to attach their name onto the idea they submit, we also envision having a little plaque that, acknowledges them if it gets to be an idea that wins. And that will be the last stage, which we'll come back to the public with in September. So the voting period will be then September 13th through October 13th.
Okay.
For my brain, I love to keep the date the same.
I like that very much, that it stays consistent. So I want you to talk a little bit more about the voting period. So understanding you've gone through all this, the ideas have been submitted, they have been ranked, all of this, they're grouped into those categories. Now comes
voting.
Yes. So tell me a little, because I'm kind of envisioning like an Academy Award situation. So talk me down from that and help me get to this place, please.
Yes, I would love that. If we could present the awards, that would be an amazing ceremony. So the other thing I should mention is the ideas from each category that go onto the ballot. We won't start with all of them that are submitted, but we'll get down to a final 20.
Okay, 20, great.
So from 20 ideas, we're going to ask residents to rank their top 5. And then we'll select ideas that are most popular until the funding runs out.
Okay.
So that will be done in an online platform that's developed by Stanford and used by many cities across the U.S. that do participatory budgeting. And then we will announce the winning projects, maybe on a stage and with a red carpet.
I'm supportive of that idea, yes.
And then we'll get to work. Once that's done in October, we'll start to procure those projects and get them out into the community.
So how does reporting back to the community happen, I guess, once things have kicked off?
Yeah. We want to do, some kind of update, at least quarterly, of the project status, make that visible on the webpage.
Great.
As well as having the budget delegates who review all of the projects provide reasoning for why they may not continue. If they didn't score high enough, if they don't follow the criteria, if 5 people suggested the same idea and we, turn that into one.
Right.
We want to make sure that there's transparency for the community and that they see the trust and that it is completely open to everyone.
So I know you've said, changing gears a little, I know you said you've gone to the Food Security Coalition. So as you're starting to introduce this in different ways, what's the response been like? What kind of feedback are you getting kind of in the moment as you're talking through the PB process?
Yeah, people are excited. I think being our first cycle, it sometimes helps to think about example ideas or pull things from other communities that they've implemented with it. Folks like myself who are entrenched in the city budget all the time, 24/7, may have a better gauge of what costs $1 million and what does not. Whereas some folks might need some anchoring in terms of what things are less and what things are more.
Yes.
But besides that, I think we're going to wait and see how this turns out. But people are pretty thrilled to see this kind of opportunity to engage and being presented with an easy way to get involved.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, again, we talk in terms of a game changer. I think for people to kind of walk through that process as a resident, right? You're invested in the community you live in. You want to share your idea. If your idea is chosen, or if not, you're still following along with the others. And to actually kind of close the loop with that seems just like a really great experience, I would think. Sometimes we know as city employees, people are often feel like suggestions sometimes go into a void. And I think that this is a really great way to show no, that the city is listening. There's action associated with this. There are resources dedicated to this. And, put your idea out there and you could be the one rolling up in the red carpet. I mean, just kidding. We can't have a red carpet. But
Yeah. And then hopefully, people springboard after this into, maybe they want to look at a position on a board, a commission that they're passionate about. Maybe they apply to work with the city. Or stay engaged, or they watch a city council meeting, or they continue to stay in contact with, their city councilor and give them updates of their budget priorities going forward. So we want this to be an easy entry point for a lot of people to get that information in an area that they're passionate about.
So I did want to ask you, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier. So your job is budget analyst, so clearly you're all about that. What is the most exciting about this concept for you? Being involved from the beginning, you have your dedicated scope of work. As I referenced, we're heading into city budget time now, so we know all about that and the deadlines. But what does this kind of change in terms of your own excitement about this?
Yeah, well, this will only be my second budget working with the city. So the second time around, I feel a bit more seasoned, but I still have a lot to learn. So I personally have loved getting to see all that outreach in the communities and going deeper than department heads, but really doing that, groundwork of outreach and seeing how they interact with the communities. But seeing the ideas come in, what I've loved is that these are people who don't have the same mental guardrails of, we're always thinking about following mass general law, procurement laws, and, what already exists in the city budget. Whereas people are coming in and saying things that could be as simple as an idea I saw already submitted is free doggy bags so you can pick up after your dog.
I think that would be supported by a lot of people who have inadvertently had a less than positive experience about that.
Yeah, so it's great to see the creativity of the community and the passion come to life. We've only had the website live for, a little under 48 hours.
Okay.
And we already have over 130 ideas submitted.
Wow. So that is great. So people are really kind of just jumping onto this. This is great.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I left work yesterday, I had seen there were about 35 ideas, and I said, that's perfect. We'll get a lot of traction on the first day.
Of course.
And then it will fizzle down for a while. And our goal for the first year was to get 100 ideas.
Oh, well, A+. There you go.
So now we've got 100. When I looked back to see, for our neighboring city, Cambridge, their first year, they have a larger population than us, but they had about 380 ideas. So if we could get to there, that would be my next benchmark. But seeing the passion already and people who are, liking other submissions, commenting about the feasibility or commenting that they love that idea.
Wow.
Or that it might be better at this location or things like that has been really exciting.
Seems like it has the opportunity to build some nice camaraderie too. I mean, I think it will be interesting for residents to see, because sometimes I think for each of us as individuals, you sometimes think like you're the only one sometimes with this particular vision, or it must be very nice to have that reinforced when you're like, you have this idea that's like, could be really beneficial and, could change things. And then to realize like other people are thinking that way with you as well. So it feels like it's an opportunity to organically grow smaller subsets of community as well.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of that. And then what's also encouraging is people saying the same things as the mayor's priorities and things that people are working on in the city. And you get to say like, yes, that idea is already going to happen. Like you're going to see it soon. But it has been great to see that grow, and I'll continue to be refreshing and checking back the idea submissions from now until May.
I'm very interested now to hear what the final number on May 20th will be. Do you think that people are somewhat, or may have been pre-interested almost because of knowing that other communities have done that? And as you referenced, Mayor Ballantyne several years back had been like, here's the direction the city should go in. So do you think that people, once you kind of launched, do you think that there was just the initial like, yes, because people had already been thinking about it? Or in some instances, do you think it's just a brand new concept that's going to people? Or maybe it's both?
I think it's a little bit of both. People would have seen the posts on social media or the city newsletter. Members of the working group hopefully have already started to share it with their circles and through counselors as well. But I think these might be people who were already interested because they saw it in Cambridge, or I think back in 2019 we might have had a counselor who helped implement it in Chicago, who maybe came and spoke. I wasn't with the city at the time. So they may have already had that interest, but it'll be really great when I go out into the community as well to see folks who haven't heard of it before and to see the potential, like see the gear shift in their brain as they start to realize what it could be. For those who haven't been involved or haven't followed the city on social media or anything, that will continue to grow as well.
I will say personally, for Health and Human Services, we've created a new youth services division. So we'll have a youth services director and a youth services coordinator. So it's really exciting for me to kind of sift through, I think at some point too, the ideas that are being presented by young people, because as we talk about, we want to grow new leaders all the time. And I think the fact that the age is, 12 and up, that's really great to imagine all the craziness and the quirkiness and the amazingness of what the ideas will be. But I also think this is kind of like a nice pot of information for us to have as we're starting this new division, to be like, here are some ideas that maybe don't go all the way through, to getting onto the ballot or weren't one of the ones selected, but at least know what young people are talking about. So as we continue to grow our partnership with our Parks and Recreation around the teen center space, to be like, maybe there's other ways to, consider some of these things that didn't fall into the PB process, but at least to reinforce to young people, we heard what they said.
Yeah, and especially reaching the youth is another good way to reach parents, especially parents who may not be connected with the city. But another great part about participatory budgeting is we're not requiring anyone to submit their personal information, right? It's open to anyone living in the city who wants to submit an idea, regardless of immigrant status. If you don't want to submit your name and have us know who you are, you don't have to. We do have optional demographic information when folks submit to see if we're reaching everyone equitably. But we do want to see what the people 19 and under, that's the box we'll be checking, Nancy, is what do they want to see happen? And, if we can meet with different groups, I'd love to share it with them, because I think their ideas will be exciting.
This has been great, Megan. I will say I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this information. I think that I was familiar with the concept of it, but I also feel kind of like recharged and a little, more jazzed about it, honestly, thinking of all of this and having a more concrete understanding of the next steps involved. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, present the information. If community members have questions, they can certainly reach out for follow-up. If you want to just provide the link for the online information again.
I will. Somervillema.gov /PB.
I do appreciate that it has it into that. So
We don't need everyone to spell it correctly because participatory budgeting is a mouthful and easily misspelled.
excellent. Thank you again, Megan.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.